Hi, welcome to week 5 for microeconomics. This week's topic is monopolies. Before we get to that, I'll talk about week 4. Nice conversations. People are doing the work, like reading your posts. Couple people I've given a little feedback. Because your posts are such a big part of this class, try to strive for 3 paragraphs. If you're not sure what a paragraph is, go look it up. Break it apart. Give as many examples as you can. Tie the topic, if you can, to things we're reading, things we're covering in class. Anytime you can do that in college, most of you are older. You're farther up the food chain in the college part. But one thing I tell students is spit back the topics, spit back things the professor, teachers are saying, and you can't go wrong. So leverage the content as much as you can in your conversations. And again, I'm seeing some really good original thoughts, things that pertain to your own lives. Quizzes look great. There'll be another quiz, maybe not this week. It'll probably be next week. Putting it together right now. This week we have an article. Probably in the next couple remaining classes, I'll ask you to read an article that ties to what we're covering. This week's Google and the Google piece. So back to monopolies. So monopolies. If you've never played the game Monopoly, you should. It's an age-old game. Been around for a long time. Local company for a lot of you, Hasbro, from Rhode Island. I've used the game to teach accounting. It's a business concepts. We call it Monopoly, where we just use the board and then we've made spreadsheets out of it, and you have to make entries every time you move around the board. So that's helped us a lot. But anyways, the game Monopoly gives us the tenets of business, really. And then what your goal is to get a monopoly. Ideally, you purchase as many properties on one side of the board as you can. Obviously, 2 sides of the board would be great too. But the reason you want to ascend to that side of the board is you want to dominate anyone that lands on that side, which is 25% chance, right? With 4 sides. If someone lands on it and you own everything, what do you get to do? Well, you charge a lot of money. Monopolies are examples of monopolies in that, if real estate anyways, are downtown Providence or downtown Boston or New York City. You're in places where there's lots of people. You're willing to pay huge rents, leases, because you get a lot of traffic. And in turn, a lot of times you charge higher prices in turn. The monopoly means, in general, if I'm a McDonald's, I can decide that I won't allow any other McDonald's within 5 miles of me. So internally, I don't, that example right there of a retail part, I feel like with Dunkin' Donuts, they have a monopoly on coffee, but they don't, right? Because there's a lot of different choices of coffee. I feel like, though, every 5 or 10 miles I go, there's another Dunkin' Donuts. So is that a monopoly or not? It's just opportunistic behavior by a place, by a store, by a business, that they can expand so much. If one's too busy, you can go to another one down the street. So I'm going to stay away. We stay away a little bit, especially in economics, of good, bad. We will talk a bit about monopolies that are legal. Today's Sunday. If you watch NFL football, well, that's a gigantic monopoly, right? Sports get an exemption from the government because they're monopolies. Anyone can't just go join an NFL team, right? It's a private network. They want to limit who can join, because then that that increases the quality ideally, right? Rather than having twice as many teams. Eventually, a lot of sports do expand and have more teams. And a lot of old folks would say, "Oh, remember when there was only X amount of teams?" But if there's money to be made because people want to, there's incessant demand for the product, then you should expand if you can. You can get away with it. But the government had to bless that. All the sports, not just NFL, NBA, couple things. Also, utilities, for different reasons. Back in the day, when we got our first power lines in New England, let's say, we got our first phone lines, first electric lines. There was one company, they agreed to lay down the power lines to put all the infrastructure in because they were the only game in town that were going to charge people. Over time, it's still not really feasible for there to be a competitor per se of electric, let's say electric wires and stuff. But as we see in lots of other industries, which one I'll mention in a second, there are other ways to get power, aren't they now? It's not maybe not from another rival electric company, but maybe now solar, right? Maybe wind. Maybe I'm going to build a wind farm in my, down the street. So theoretically, technology prices and availability arrive, and then that does bring some competition. Maybe you would call that natural competition, but it made perfect sense and still makes sense to just have one electric company in one, at the time, one phone company, because they spent a lot of money building out their infrastructure. And so they should have been awarded with charging. Now, because the government realized what the issues were, they've regulated it and they've limited the rates that they can charge via electricity. Not phone as much anymore, but and when they want to raise rates, when utility, same with water, the water company is a similar one. When those entities want to call them municipalities or utilities, when they want to raise money, they have to go to the government and ask and rationalize why. Oh, we got to expand. We got to, things are outdated. We got to update our plant and our infrastructure. So they have to get an approval of how much they can raise rates. So that's the catch-22 with being the only game in town. Now, the only game in town. So I gave an example of originally there was one phone company, right? One phone company would provide service to a neighborhood, to a town, to an area. Well, now that's changed, isn't it? It's pretty much changed naturally too, because phone companies, the traditional dial-up phones, now there's cell phone, and you could get a cell phone from anybody, right? And now even the cable company I could get cell phone service through. They have an advantage because often the cable company is already in your house. So let's talk about the cable company. Same kind of thing. In my town in Massachusetts, Comcast was the first cable company to arrive at everybody's doorstep. The only way they would agree to come to my town would be if they were the exclusive provider. There's a town next to me that provided cable service, maybe phone service as well through their electric company. It's a town called Braintree, Braintree Electric. And then there's another town between where I think a lot of us are called Norwood, Massachusetts. They also were offering service through their electric company that was rivaling, like say, like in the one near me, I think still has Comcast, but now it was a rivalry. When there's a rivalry with economics, supply and demand, when there's different choices of suppliers, as we know, prices are down. Better for consumers, some more choices. When that goes away, then the prices move up because there's no competition. So that is a primary reason why we want to have competitors This week's called Monopoly. So these are scenarios where businesses, I'll say this, businesses strive to be in a monopolistic position. The technology companies in the news that we talk about every day, uh, let's see, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, right? A lot of those things have turned into verbs. When I go do a search, if I say, oh, well, if my wife says something, I say, oh, I'll go Google it, right? Well, there's lots of search engines I could use, believe it or not. But the fact that I'm saying Google means they own it, right? And I think some gigantic percentage of searches are done by Google. So now the question is Google a monopoly? Should it be broken up? Why is it so big? Why is it so dominant? Why is it in our vernacular where we actually turned it into a verb? The last FTC chairman, Federal Trade Commission chairman, a political appointment, but one with a lot of juice for the Biden administration, was a woman named Linda Kahn. And she and more as a more liberal FTC chairman was really pounding the doors and had reached some judgments with Amazon and definitely Google. Google has been found to be monopolistic. Proposals to the next steps to slap them kind of fell apart because the election happened. Linda Kahn is no longer the FTC chairman. I'm not sure where that Google thing stands. Linda Kahn, by the way, now is working for the newly elected mayor of New York City in his administration. But nonetheless, I struggle a little bit about the monopoly status when that's labeled for firms that just seem to have won the race. They seem to be the best at what they do. Amazon, I'm an old guy. I remember when there was 40 Amazons. When the internet first took off in the 90s, there was a whole bunch of companies just starting off that were doing mostly what Amazon does, the core of it. Amazon started off just selling books, and then they morphed into selling everything and even services. So I kind of pause a little bit when I say, is that a monopoly? To me, I think it's like just a business that they've become to dominate. There's no verb yet. I don't say Amazon things yet, like Google. But you think about other industries. A lot of you won't recognize this, but in my office jobs I had over the years, when we went to make a copy, we Xeroxed it. When we went to send an envelope or document to another place overnight, we FedExed it. Now, is FedEx the only courier that can do stuff overnight? No. Are there other copiers besides Xerox? For sure. But because that was such a dominant brand, people just used that. Now, those companies were not accused of monopolies. Like FedEx, there's a couple rivals to FedEx, but they're such gigantic enterprises that it's very difficult for someone else to come in and compete. I'd say that about Google. Very, very hard to reach the scale that Google did. So I'm kind of hesitant to just automatically say that they are an antitrust monopolistic. By the way, antitrust, we'll delve into this more next week. There's really this week is monopoly, next week's antitrust. So there could be a little bit of repetition. So this week, same old stuff. We're going to have a PowerPoint, you got a voice thread, some Quizlet on the terms, that Google store thing. Like I said, there won't be a quiz this week, but it probably will be one next week on this material. And I think not a discussion, I don't think this week. I think there's one farther out. So again, I'll tell you my part. Some of it is some of the business stuff, regulatory people is kind of political. Democrats tend to be more regulatory, I'd say, um, rightly or wrongly. Republicans, in particular, this administration, kind of like it's almost like wild, wild west. For different reasons, this whole philosophy about businesses. Should businesses be limited? I teach a financial management class, undergraduate and graduate, and the goal of financial manager is maximize value. So if you're running a firm, you want to make the most money you can, and that if that means making deals with people that are going to help your firm, then usually you're going to do it. You gotta be careful that you're not breaking any laws. And so that's really a problem. So there is a level of politics involved in monopolies, definitely for sports. Um, One example I'll give you, another example of where, in theory, if there's a business situation, and there is opportunity for competition as a natural thing, the competition will eat away at the monopoly. And gave you those points about phone, for example. It's a great example of there was Ma Bell. Way back when there was this company called AT&T, and they kind of ran long distance phone service. They got broken apart by the FTC in the 70s, I think. And little by little, after the breakup, a lot of business people, investors, kind of put stuff back together. They actually rolled a lot of those companies back together and kind of said, no, this isn't AT&T anymore. Now AT&T mostly does long distance and cable providing. They're a different world, but that's an example of breaking apart a monopoly. A monopoly that exists, also known as a cartel, that affects us in our daily lives still, is something called OPEC, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. The main player is Saudi Arabia, but interestingly, another main player and one of the founders of OPEC, which we equate with Mideast, is Venezuela. So Venezuela is a country based on oil. They make lots and lots of revenue from exporting oil, but now they're a communist country and they're not really doing as well. So the cartel called OPEC has really dominated American society as one of the larger businesses in the world. And little by little, because we were all feeling frustrated with being, having to base everything around OPEC. Something called fracking, and a lot of technologies in the United States have evolved. Some people say devolved. They don't like fracking. But now the United States has become a net exporter of oil. Back in the day, some of the biggest money makers, entrepreneurs in the United States in the 1800s it was oil. The Rockefellers was oil. There was a lot of oil in the United States, like Pennsylvania, all around the Midwest, Mideast, Midwest, Oklahoma. And so that oil didn't necessarily go away, but the volumes did, in the capabilities of extracting that oil out of the ground. So now, and with a new technology called fracking and more and better technology of drilling for oil, the United States has become a competitor to OPEC, which in a way has lowered the price of oil. It may not feel it. Some of you commented in the discussion about how expensive oil is in Massachusetts, and every time I have a conversation, I scratch my head. I'm older. Oil is $3. A gallon of gasoline is around $3. It was around $3 last year. It was around $3 10 years ago. It was around $3 20 years ago. So I don't really understand how those statements about oil prices being higher, I don't get it. A lot of the gallon of gas that you pay for, depending on which state you live in, they tag on state taxes. There's always federal taxes, but state taxes. So California, huge state taxes in your gallon of gas. But my point is that competition arrived to OPEC and hurt, which is an illegal in the United States, a cartel, and generally a monopoly. We don't govern the Mid East and the participants of OPEC. That's not we don't have a thing of it, but that's become really successful that we've been able to compete. So one of the solutions to monopoly sometimes is offer something different or better. And like I say, we've seen that in the communications industry, for sure, with phone stuff, with Linda, especially with long distance stuff. Talk about I talk about in the slide, in the PowerPoint, an example of New York City. I just picked New York City, but many cities have a cab system. This is before rivals, but so the cities would be a monopoly. The cab systems would be a monopoly. In order to drive a cab in a big city in the United States, you needed to have a license. In order to get a license, you'd have to pay the city X amount of money. New York City, by the way, because it's so big, and at the time you could make so much money, the Russian mob was very involved in buying these they call them medallions. So per cat, to run a cat, buy a cat, run or operate a cab, you had to go to the city of New York, and it became an open auction after a while. And then you'd have to pay up for the medallion, which would enable you to be a licensed, regulated cab. The city could regulate how many cabs there were, which would make sure that the money would be adequate for all the participants. There always was what they call gypsy cabs, cab drivers that weren't regulated, trying to drive under the radar. And that worked for a while. Again, organized crime came in and was buying up the medallion, so that's a problem. But more importantly, again, another example is Uber came along. And Uber just bypassed regulation. The regulators just dropped the ball, not just New York City, but everywhere. They didn't take Uber seriously, or Lyft. And all of a sudden, there was massive competition for the cab companies. And then the state tried to go backwards and say, oh, we got to regulate Uber. And it was too late. It was too late to do that. So in the macro world of cabs and that kind of transportation, prices went down. Probably not a lot, but kind of like riding a cab when it's raining versus riding a cab when it's really sunny out. Uber does surge pricing and stuff, so they're very market-based. But anyways, that's an example of competition coming into a monopoly. The cab system was monopoly. Competition came in and sort of broke down that monopoly somewhat. So that's an example. Other legal barriers to other legal situations that we do in the United States, and the goal of the United States of doing this is to foster research and development, foster ingenuity, foster patents. There's patent laws. There's licenses. So we have departments in the government that says, if you come up with an original idea of something that's useful, and you can prove that no one else has done it, and then get the blessing of the U.S. Patent Office, you have a patent on whatever that product is. So no one else can do that same thing, exact same thing, without paying you off, paying you some kind of residual. So that has been characterized. That process has pushed more people to come up with patents. If that wasn't there, there'd be little incentive to do the research and development and experimenting to come up with new ideas. We see that around the world, Thailand, places that don't have any kind of rules like that. Their level of entrepreneurial there, because people take over. Licenses as well. Our drug system, run by the FDA. If you um, if you're a drug company and you want to invest a cure for this or that, the FDA and the patent in that area will grant you exclusive use of that compound, we'd call it, for I think it's 8 years for drugs. So in that 8 years, you're the only one that can produce a diet pill or something like that. After that happens, anybody can kind of come up and compete with you, and that's where this world of generics comes in. So that scenario I just described is controversial in the sense that people resent having to pay the amounts of money that they might have to for a new medicine or cancer drug, that's very expensive. People resent that it costs a lot, but absent that system, you might not have ever been invented, or people would have never had an incentive to come up with solutions to those problems, to those issues. So it kind of goes around and around in terms of the entrepreneurial business situation we are. And in fact, patents and licenses are actually probably not particularly capitalistic things. We're sort of stacking the deck a little bit. And in fact, again, a lot of people point to those types of systems that lead to more ingenuity, more discoveries, more business ideas. Let's see. So then there's also something that we talk about called price issues, price discrimination. So essentially, price discrimination means I'm going to give you one price, I'm going to give someone else another price. It's funny how it's worded in the books. It's price discrimination is illegal if, and you probably wouldn't be surprised, if I'm discriminating because of price, because of race or creed or sex, then yeah, it's illegal. However, there's lots of cases where businesses do change their prices based on situations, and it's perfectly legal and probably really smart. So, for example, movie theaters, I'm sure this is still the case now, but when movies were doing better before alternatives, you could go to a matinee. You could go see a movie on a weekday at 1:00 and it would be half price. So that's price discrimination, right? Because if I go at 7 at night, then the ticket price is twice as much. And I could go whine and complain and say, but what are they trying to do? They're trying to lure more people in the movie theater, right? So that's simple economics, nothing, nefarious there. However, if I do say, well, if you're a guy with glasses, we're going to charge you double the price, right? Then that would be bad. Airlines have different levels of seats. They charge you different amounts, right? If you want to be in first class, you're going to pay this much. You want to be in the cattle cars back there, you're going to pay this much. Movie tickets, college. The college one I see a lot. I've seen it more and more is if you live in Massachusetts, you can't drive on them anywhere without seeing big billboards that really want me or my kids or somebody to go to school in New York State in the SUNY system. Or they want me to go to University of Maine and I'll get in-state tuition if I do that. So if I'm not from Massachusetts, I might not get that price, right? But it's part of marketing. And so there could be accusations to say, oh, you're discriminating. Well, it's price discrimination. And again, there's no civil laws being broken. Let's see. All right, I think that's about it. I'm going to wrap it up. Again, reach out and ask me any questions. Like I say, I'm as time goes on, I post more stories I want you to read over. And they, if they're on there, they potentially could be on the quiz, that Google article, and then something I'm posting for antitrust one, and going forward, those kind of articles will, you should read them and study them. Next quiz will be very similar with the multiple choice kind of stuff. So again, have a good week. Keep working hard. And again, if you have any questions, just let me know.